Here is a little background on Mr. Coworthy. He took an interest in environment science. He was in high school and he went to Holy Cross as a chemistry major. He wanted to research laboratory environment, and his first job was working as a laboratory technology for environment firm. This did not excite him very much. He felt alone working with people on project sites where he could do field work and get hand-on training. As a research, he pro- product manager and environment engineer at tough part-time while working full-time at Delhi and Ecom over 3 years. He started H&A doing a lot of field work, which was important part of field career. The permanent understanding of producing word on how things can be done. Do y'all have any questions?
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. So should I get started now, or? Okay. So I just wanted to say, Michael, listening to the Tavars, it reminded me of my family, because I grew up in the next town over from the Tavars in New Bedford and Wareham, and my mom actually used to date Ralph Tavars back in the day. So appreciate it. So let me do this. Should I get this right here? Can everyone see that?
Nope, can't see anything, Chief.
No, sorry. Do we try this again? How about now?
Nope.
Try this one.
Are you using the share screen option?
Yes.
It's coming up now. Gotcha.
Okay. Can you see the full screen now?
It's on the display mode, but I think this is fine. We can.
Oh, it's on. I can switch. Sorry about this. How about that?
This is cool.
Okay. All righty. So I'd like to, usually start off with a health and safety moment as part of our meeting and our safety culture we have at Haley and Aldrich. So just want to remind everyone that is tick season as the weather starts to get warmer here and started getting in the 60s. So it's important that you start being on the lookout for them and knowing that they're most active from, mid-March to mid-May, and then again from, mid-August into November. And it's just, they do not hibernate, they just kind of go dormant over the winter and the cold seasons, and they're back. I've seen a couple already just on my neighbor's dog. So as you may know, Lyme disease is the most ill effect from a tick bite, and it can cause some serious health issues. So just be careful. And so some of the things you can do to prevent the ticks are to, wear light colored clothing, or if you're out in the woods or in an area that you suspect be a population of ticks, tuck your shirt in, try to use some DEET repellent if you can. And then, when you come back indoors, it's important just to have, yourself or someone just do a full body scan on you just to see if there's anything hanging on your clothes or on your body. So just want to, and then if in fact that you are, tick doesn't land on you or is embedded in your skin, it's just important after you remove it. I'm not going to go through the process of doing this, but just make sure you wash your hands in the affected area thoroughly with either alcohol and a soap solution when you're done. So again, Alex, thanks for the introduction. I'm an environmental engineer. I've been at Haley and Aldrich just about 30 years or so. I started as an entry-level person and currently a licensed site professional, which means I'm licensed within Massachusetts to render certain opinions on assessment and cleanup of sites. I got my chemistry degree at Holy Cross. And then, as Alex mentioned, I work part-time to get my master's at Tufts. The photo on the right is a current active project that we're working on. It's for Northeastern University. It's a new science building. What you see sticking out of the ground is the steel sheeting to help with the supportive excavation. It's going to have 2 levels of below-grade parking. It's located, to the right is Columbus Avenue. And then to the left is the Ruggles Orange Line T-stop. And we constructed the building that's in the foreground, that sort of honeycomb building a few years ago. And this is part of their second phase of development. So when we talk about, engineering and environmental engineering, these are the real basics. There's some media that is impacted by oil or hazardous materials, or we like to call contaminants. And these impacts could be to groundwater, to soil, surface water, the wetlands and sediment, or even indoor air, and most importantly, drinking water. And why do we really care? Because these impacts to the human receptors can cause real harm through, direct contact, through breathing in the air, or ingestion indirectly or directly. And there's also impacts to the ecological receptors, meaning the wetlands, the fish, or wildlife. And there's also, impacts to public safety and welfare. And what I mean by that is that, you could have an oil tanker spill over on the highway and release, oil, thousands and thousands of gallons, and the traffic comes on it, and you can have an accident from, from slipping on the oil. So that's sort of the public welfare piece to it. It's just a quick snapshot of some of the offices that we have. We've been growing since I've been there. We're up to 800 employees now, and we have offices now in Hawaii and even Guam right now. But I don't get a chance to move outside the Northeast very much, so I'm practiced primarily in Massachusetts, unfortunately. But some of you may have seen this slide from Allie the last time around, but I just wanted to kind of show it again for some folks that might not have seen it. Our company has been, taking a lot more attention and more serious about, the racial inequality and racial justice that's been happening over the last couple of years. And we even, restated our vision statement to show that we're a welcoming and diverse community, and looking to have more outreach in some of the programs that we've been doing recently. As you can see, we're doing pretty well. We did, our CEO likes to poll the industry to see how we're doing and see how our competitors are doing and our peer firms. And as you can see on the first column, we do a pretty good job with having women percentages within our staff, but we don't really do a very good job as far as racially diverse within our company. We have 0% board of directors in our company, and 0% in the top percent payroll. And I happen to be probably one of the more senior people, so I need to ask for a raise when I get back. So,
Yeah, all right.
but we're doing a better job, and but we still have a lot more work to do. And so when we talk about environmental in my general practice, typically, it's really trying to do your due diligence, doing your homework. And the photo on the right is an example of some of our young staff doing some soil sampling when we're doing a test boring program to collect information on the subsurface to figure out what we're going to build. And this was the new hub on Causeway, right, which is part of the TD Garden where the Celtics and Bruins play. So, you know, collecting soil samples to help understand what those risks might be as part of development. The due diligence is often done if you're looking to take out a loan or to refinance the property. It's also required if you're a municipality or a developer looking to obtain some environmental grants. And the key is you just don't want to have any surprises once you start to put a shovel or an excavator into the ground. So this is a typical, you know, construction project that we had worked on. The photo on the upper right is a multi-high-rise building that we were constructing. Involved both geotechnical and environmental work. The geotechnical was basically telling us what type of foundation system do we need to have to support the load of the building. And the environmental piece is what are we going to do with the soil that we have to take out to have the displacement, and where is it going to go, and what does it look like? And so that photo on the left, you can see that there's a high percentage of brick and debris that we have to characterize to get rid of. And then the photo on the right shows an old oil water separator that we had to encounter and had to pump out the oily liquids and remove it as part of the construction. And often, you know, there are a lot of things that we always don't anticipate, but we have to address during the construction. And we often always hit stuff like this in our urban environments. And sometimes we even encounter an old underground storage tank that we have to address. So I just want to mention the American Society for Testing and Materials. It's really the ASTM. It's really the gold standard for civil engineering design and performance. It's, you know, Corey and the trades and construction people are very familiar with certain standards that you have to uphold along with the building codes. But when we talk on the environmental component of it, it's also referred to a phase 1 site assessment or a 21E. And the goal is to identify what we call these recognized environmental conditions. And it's to help a potential lender or buyer or seller of property manage and understand what those business risks might be. Like if I'm looking to buy a new property with the developer, they don't want to go unknown of what might show up. So they would hire someone to do a phase 1 to understand what might be there by looking at the site history and just looking at the surrounding properties to help understand what environmental impacts might exist. And it's done by an environmental professional or can also be done by a licensed site professional. So why do we do the due diligence? You know, what's one of the things that we start to look for? And the photo here on the left these are both aerial photographs taken at different times. The one on the left was in the 1940s. This is the Columbia Point project, the home of UMass Boston. It was, you know, as you can see, it had been filled over time. It's a site of a former landfill and burning dump. And, you know, it looks pretty innocent enough on the right and today in 2012, but see how it's expanded and, you know, it's all on filled land. So it's just it's important to understand that when you're doing your due diligence and your homework. So often during the construction component, before we move forward, we engage an architect and the owner to, you know, develop a plan. This is like a site plan on the right that shows where the 2 new buildings are going to be, and we typically come up with a pre-characterization and sampling plan to help understand what the soils and groundwater looks like. You see these boxes that are constructed. We typically do these on 50 by 50 cells, and it's done on a grid to help understand the representativeness of the soil. Obviously, we're not going to sample every, you know, gram or square inch of soil that comes out, so we try to sample on a representative area to provide that for the facilities. And knowing that the soil has to go off-site. You have to test it before it goes off-site. And we also prepare, soil management and health and safety plans to help identify the risks and potential exposures for the workers. So the same project is a project example for the new UMass Boston residence halls, which is the very first constructed on campus. The photos on the top there looks innocently enough as a parking lot, but knowing from those aerial photos that we looked at earlier that it's on a landfill. So and when we did our testing program, we found that there was hazardous materials in the ground, and also asbestos in soil and methane gas that is coming off from the landfill. So there was a lot of regulatory approvals to go along the way in constructing this particular project, and we had to create, bring in some clean material so that the trades could work on clean surfaces, so that people weren't in elevated PPE, personal protective equipment, or having to limit some of the air monitoring that we did. But we still had to do extensive air monitoring during construction. And we were collecting somewhere in the order of, like probably 12 samples a day, every day during the construction period. Oops, I want to just go back here. So the photo on the upper right, we just didn't put this building on the ground. We had to put in a vapor barrier, and it looks like almost like asphalt. It's sprayed in liquid form, and underneath that barrier is some perforated piping to vent the methane gas, so that when the building was constructed, the building occupants weren't exposed to the methane, and it was vented to the exterior. And we have extensive air monitoring devices set up in the event that it does trigger a certain level that will have an audible alarm, so the students and other people in the building can evacuate if there's an emergency condition if it's triggered. Let's see. This is just another example of a site. It's in the Seaport area. It's the Clipper Ship project. It's currently a multi-family residential project with apartments. The new construction includes a restaurant with kayak centers. There's a new public harbor walkway. We had to create a new shoreline, and there was a lot of contamination from historic use for commercial industrial use, a lot of warehouses along the Boston Harbor waterfront there. And this particular site also had asbestos in soil and hazardous materials that we had to manage, and also place a marker barrier and clean cap, and also had to have a deed restriction at the end for occupancy for the site. So some of the new and emerging things that we're getting into, that's just beyond our typical environmental geotech. We're doing a lot of work to account for climate change and sea level rise, particularly in the Boston area, which is obviously a real problem. And particularly the last couple of years, it's been a lot of sea level rise, and the new construction is having to account for that. So we're also doing a lot of geothermal work, evaluation and design. We help with the project team and the owner get their sustainabilities up so that they can have the LEED accreditation. And another example project here is just that we did in Boston is to deploy these flood barriers, as seen in that photo on the right, to account for anticipation of a storm surge event, to protect the building, the basement, to keep it dry. And I just wanted to quickly just talk about the role of a licensed site professional, which is what I am. So Massachusetts has a privatized program for the cleanup of these hazardous waste sites. These LSPs, we work on behalf of property owners to oversee the assessment and cleanup of these contaminated properties. There's just about 600 LSPs that are licensed in Massachusetts now. They tend to consist of scientists, engineers, even public health specialists that have this expertise. And since 1993, we cleaned up over 30,000 sites to restore them for occupancy for either residential or commercial use. And I like, just to mention that the Licensed Site Professional Association, it's something that, you students can take a look at their website, lspa.org, to look for, some training programs, some courses, and there's always discount for students to participate in those things. There's a lot of good resources there if you're interested in the environmental professional. And they're also currently, providing annual scholarships to about 2 to 3 students every year. And they're currently accepting applications they're due April 23rd if you're interested in. And if anyone on the call is interested and needs more information, please feel free to reach out to me and I can explain a little bit more about the program. If there's some training opportunities that might be of interest to you, I can work with you and help identify those for you. So, I think that's all I have at this point.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Worthy. That was amazing.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I know it's a lot, and I try not to get too technical, but I can't help it. I'm an engineer, so.
First, let me say thank you, and I would open it up to any of the students or the teachers or educators on the call to feel free to ask Cole any questions you might have.
And if you also just want to ask me, how I got to where I was, I mean, that's something I would be willing and happy to share with you as well. So how did I get interested in this field, you might wonder. So when I was in high school, I took an interest in the math and sciences and wasn't much of an English or history buff. So I got a chemistry kit when I was younger and started like playing with the different reagents to a point where I was taking household stuff and nearly like burnt my eyes not knowing what ammonia and the bleach could do and cause a chemical reaction. So I figured I better understand this a little bit more before I really start to play around with it. And I then went on to college and pursued chemistry because I really liked to, understand the different types of contaminants and how they behave in the environment and how do I clean them up. And that's sort of where I am today.
Now, Mr. Worthy, the school that you went to, was it focused on STEM?
At the high school level, you mean?
High school level, yes.
No, it was just broad range. In fact, I went to a liberal arts school because I didn't want to focus right away on engineering. I just wanted to get a broad range of different disciplines. In fact, I took a lot of foreign languages, Latin and French, and I played football, basketball, and track. I was tried to be well versed in what I did. I didn't try to focus on one specialty because I'm still didn't know what I really wanted to do.
Copy that. And so Alex asked the question, how do you get to where you're at now? Our next question came from is it Gladson or Gladson?
It's Gladson.
Gladson, thank you, Gladson. Do you want to just ask the question, Gladson? I know you
sure.
typed it. Thank you.
Yes. So my question is, what's one advice you can give to someone who wants to enter the field?
I would say, just like if you really want to get into environmental engineering and you're going to stay within the Massachusetts area, I think a good resource is that lspa.org website, just to see what's available. And we, like our company does like job shadow programs. I know other companies are doing that, starting to do that a little bit more, and just to, maybe perhaps like look into doing like a like either an 8-hour or a 40-hour OSHA health and safety training. There's like asbestos awareness training opportunities, and just ask a lot of questions, and don't be afraid to ask them. And people are willing to help and like to share their experiences. And
Awesome,
Thank you.
And we have another question from our guy, Mr. Burnett, and I'm going to make it a two-part question if you don't mind, Mr. Burnett. So Jonathan's question is, what kept you motivated through your hardships? And to make it a two-part, what are some of the hardships that you faced, from the time you were in high school through college and your professional career, and how have you stayed motivated and pushed through those hardships?
Sure. So I guess I was always a self-motivated person, which I got that from, my mom. I was raised by a single mom. She was a teacher's age, didn't make a whole lot of money. Always trying to be supportive of her, and always trying to do the right thing. And not that I was like the perfect kid, but I would, I come home from school, like get right to my homework before I went out and either practiced or played sports. And so, I mean, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, and I wanted to make money. I was one of the, other than my uncle who went to Boston College, my mom actually went to college. So I was like the third person in our family who had gone on to college. So that was something I aspired to do. I just tried to challenge myself, both in athletics and in my academia, and just try to impress people, because I felt like I was always being judged, being, often the times of, only person of color, especially when I went to Tabor Academy, which is a private school. I was one of 3 people of color in the school. So I was constantly being, judged, or trying to, work the extra harder to show them I'm worth it,
Thank you. Mr. Dixon, do you want to ask your question?
I guess I can. I was just wondering, what does an LSP get paid? How much do they get paid? I know you're trying to get your raise when you get back, but I know what job do you officially have? And is part of that being an LSP, and what does an LSP get paid?
I would say, well, in order to even be in a position to take the LSP exam, you have to have, up to 8 years of experience to show that you've been in a decision-making process to make assessments to do this type of work. So you'd already have to be in the field for a good 10 years practicing. You can't just come out of school and become an LSP. You have to gain that experience first. So I would say most LSPs, it depends on the firm you're working for, obviously, and when you decide to become one. But I would think that a minimum it would be probably in today's age, probably a minimum of $60,000 to $70,000, I would say, annually.
I did have a follow-up just with that. As you start the clock running, how do you get an internship? And where, even if it's collecting samples, you have to collect so many, is that a way to break into this field? Or how would you get an internship?
I would start reaching out to some of these like engineering firms. We typically post internships when they're available, like open requisitions, we call them. And, I know it's been hard the last year because of the COVID restrictions to really do that, but we're meeting internally with our human resources and about, hiring a Boston intern, or just look at that program, what it's going to look like. And we have to, obviously have our, loss prevention in order, and liability for having that intern go out in the field, so. And I know that the NIOP, it's a commercial real estate company here in, well, it's nationwide, but locally here in the Massachusetts chapter, they have a program called CREST, Commercial Real Estate and Training, where they have students from like 8 to 10 colleges where people of minority can join the program, and they outsource them to different companies that they're looking for interns. And then they end up hiring them once they graduate.
How, so you have to graduate to become an intern? You can't be,
No. I said you can become an intern now, but once you finish as an intern, once you graduate from college, we end up hiring them full time.
okay. So you have to be 16. How old do you have to be an intern?
That's something we're talking about with human resources. I think we're thinking it's 18. I'm not sure. We're trying to see if we can reduce that depending on what their involvement and responsibilities might be.
If no one else has a question, I do. As someone that, I don't know, I'm just thinking Boston is such a historic city and you're doing a lot of developing in the city. Like, what is the strangest environmental thing you might have come across when you're trying to like build a new project or renovate a project?
So that particular, well, it wasn't my project, but that project where I showed the sampling next to the Hub on Causeway, when we were excavating down deeper, we encountered these blue looking soils, and didn't really think of anything of it. But then once the soils were loaded onto the trucks for disposal at a disposal facility, when that load was dumped out, the soils caught on fire. And it was due to the phosphorus levels being exposed to the oxygen. And we didn't know it at the time. And then so that was a very strange happening. So the soil had to come back to the site, and then we were doing all this research trying to figure it out. And but I think the biggest challenge that I face is dealing with the public community involvement, having to go into people's homes to do indoor air sampling, because it's not something they teach you how to do, how to interact with people. You have to have a certain charisma to have them trust you, because if you tell someone that you have a level of methane, or say you have a level of something in their home that poses no risk, and they're like, well, I don't want anything in my house. Well, then to try to tell them that you have something that's a very, very low level, we've done all these calculations, it meets the state standards, but it doesn't pose any risk. So having to have those conversations to tell someone that they shouldn't be exposed to anything, but they are. And so it takes a little bit of work to that. And that's, challenging to, do that a lot of times. And people don't want, things constructed sometimes. So, we're fortunate enough to work with a lot of great clients and a lot of fun projects. So been quite grateful in that respect.
Awesome.
So you mentioned that you brought some of the soil to be disposed. Just generally, where do you dispose of the toxic waste? Like, what happens to it once you uncover it?
So there are different facilities, both in-state, out-of-state, depending on what you have. Some of the soil that is not contaminated can be reused at sometimes like quarries or another development that they need to import material on. Sometimes they go to like old cemeteries looking to regrade. It becomes a little bit more contaminated. It goes to landfills that are, looking to place the appropriate cover to cap them and close them in place. And if it's really hazardous, a lot of times it goes out of state for incineration or thermal treatment. They heat it up to extreme temperatures to volatilize the contaminants out. And if it's really, really bad, it ends up going on rail, to like Model City, like in like New York or Minerva in Ohio, for destruction. So it really depends on what you have, and it can range from $10 a ton to like $500 a ton, depending on the level of contaminant. So, and within Massachusetts, you can't just take soil from one location and bring it to another without characterizing it and understanding what's in it. And a lot of times where you bring it to, we want to have data on that receiving end to show that it's the same quality and it's not going to create more of an issue where it's going to. A lot of my work just involves like soil management, just because when you put in a hole in the ground, the soil has to go somewhere and they have to find a home for it.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or any other comments on anything that Mr. Worthy has said today?
I guess I would just ask one last question, because we'll have a number of students viewing this after the fact. I guess, what's the biggest piece of advice you'd give students that are, thinking about planning their future? And it could be general, it could be specific to what you do, but just, I always like give my mottos or whatever. So like sort of what is your biggest piece of life advice you would give students considering their next step after high school?
Do what your parents tell you to do. I think of my own kids. I would just try to, I know it's hard to think about it, but just try to envision, like maybe have like mini goals of like where you might want to be or what you might want to do in the next like 3 to 5 years. Just try to think of it in that respect, and whether it's whether it's going to college or getting a particular job or going to like a trade school, just try to set some goals up, both professionally and personally. Say you're gonna look to attend like a particular seminar, in the next year or something, to learn a little bit more.
Thank you.
Or like look to apply for, internships at a company, or look to get some additional training for a particular topic that you find interesting. Or, there's a lot of material out there, a lot of journals, and very technical, but maybe just start to read a little bit about some of the things that, interest you, and just set up little personal goals, and then check back in with yourself to see how you're doing. So I can speak for my son. He'd probably kill me if he heard me, but I remember when he graduated from UNH, and I remember him saying when he was applying to schools and he wasn't getting into some of the schools he wanted to, and his friends started getting in, and then once he finally got in, he was excited, and he told me, like, why didn't you tell me that, like, my grades counted when I was a freshman? I would have like tried harder. Like, we've been telling you that. Like, just don't like procrastinate, because it's easy to procrastinate and always find something else to do, and try to stay on course and on track, and look for feedback from your teachers and your counselors, and just check in, see how things are going. They're a great resource to talk to, like you have here, and whether it's, academically or just personally, just check in, and don't be afraid to be vulnerable and share your thoughts.
Sage advice there.
So part of our agenda, I don't know, our procedure, whatever you want to call it, that we usually do with our guest speakers is we usually ask a student to sort of summarize what they heard. And Alex is, since he's our host, he's also going to be the person summarizing for us. So unless anyone has any other questions, I'll hand it over to Alex to do a quick summary of what it was that he heard Cole say today, and then we'll close out. So Alex, if you're ready,
Thank you again, Mr. Word. We accept you for sharing your safely with us today in student. Here we are those who see you online benefit for your sharing.
All right.
My pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and you know, I don't know if as a follow-up, people have additional questions, or if you, Kristen, want to reach out and just get more information, or however we can, or Ali, or I think our next speaker is it you, Corey, or the next series?
No, I'm in May. We have.
Oh, it's someone from Niche to talk about their.
Yes.
Okay.
I think civil engineering is, in general, is the next topic.
Awesome. Yeah, Corey just wants to save the best for last is really what he's trying to do. I know him.
I'm just happy to be here.
Like, I don't know, like it doesn't have to be like, you know, like we're civil engineering, but civil engineering covers such a wide discipline of things in order to, you know, build stuff in the environment. And, you know, you have, you know, you can aspire to be an architect. If you like to draw and you're an artist, you could, you know, be a CAD designer and help with the building plans. If you know, if you're, you know, like to do field work, some people within our company, they spend their whole life just going out in the field from one job to another, to another, to another. They don't really have any other responsibilities from a project management or a client, you know, relationship. They just go out and do their thing, and they go home at the end of the day, and they like it like that. So.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I'll